The alarm echoed through the corridors of the United Earth Command's war room, sharp and insistent. The flickering holoscreens displayed the same unsettling data, anomalies in the depths of space, reports of missing colonies, and a sharp, unexplainable signal emanating from the dark void of the Yana Nebula. At first, it had been dismissed as a malfunction, but now, with multiple colonies falling silent in quick succession, there was no longer any doubt. Admiral Calder, President Murray Vance's voice cut through the rising tension, her tone steely. "What do we know about this alien fleet?" Admiral Simon Calder, head of Earth's military operations, surveyed the holographic map, his face pale and drawn. He'd seen the reports, destroyed ships, entire populations lost, but even he struggled to believe what the data implied. "It's not like anything we've faced before, ma'am," he said, his voice thick with urgency. "The SLR fleet is large, larger than any known civilization's military. Their ships, they're capable of destroying entire planets. We've lost contact with 3 mining colonies, a research station, and several smaller settlements. The attacks are swift, precise, as if they've been planning this for years." A sharp hiss of static interrupted his report as one of the junior officers at the command table connected an emergency broadcast from one of Earth's outer colonies. A distorted face appeared on the screen. Colonel Malinov, the commander of the New Helios station, a key defensive outpost at the edge of the system. The man's expression was grim, his voice barely audible over the interference. "We need help. Now? There." The transmission abruptly cut off. Vance's breath caught, and a heavy silence fell over the room. She stood, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, before it hardened again. "Get me a full spectrum of the enemy's capabilities. We need to understand what we're up against, and we need to do it quickly." As the officers scrambled to provide more information, Lawson stood near the back of the room, arms crossed, her mind racing. Captain Eva Lawson had been retired for nearly a decade. She'd led Earth's military forces through numerous conflicts and had seen humanity's might firsthand, but even she felt the weight of what was unfolding now. The XLR weren't just another alien race, they were a force of nature. Ruthless, efficient, and with technology far beyond anything humans had ever encountered. As the war room buzzed with activity, Lawson's thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her. "You're thinking what I'm thinking, aren't you?" It was Major Jax Morrell, the sharp-minded Martian engineer, and a former ally from the rebellion days. His voice had an edge of both concern and determination. "I am," she replied quietly, turning to face him. "We're not prepared for this. We're not prepared for them." "We have to be," Jax responded, his lips tight with resolve. "Because if we don't, Earth won't be the only thing we lose." Lawson nodded slowly, eyes narrowing as she focused on the command table once again. It was clear now that this wasn't just a military threat. This was an existential one. Earth's very survival was at risk, and she knew they couldn't afford hesitation. The clock was ticking. Suddenly, Vance turned toward her, as if sensing the change in the room. Her voice rang out, calm yet commanding. "Captain Lawson, we need you back in the fight. Now." Lawson's heart quickened. She hadn't been expecting the request, but the weight of it was clear. If humanity was to stand any chance of survival, she was going to have to lead once more. "I'm in," Lawson said, her voice unwavering. "But I'll need more than just a fleet. I'll need the best we can find. The best soldiers, the best minds, and everyone willing to put it all on the line. This won't be a war. This will be our last stand." Captain Eva Lawson stood at the head of the war room, her eyes scanning the faces of the gathered military leaders, scientists, and diplomats. The room was tense, the weight of Earth's fate pressing down on each individual. The attack on New Helios was only the beginning. With the Exhaler Dominion now revealed as a terrifying threat, humanity had no time to waste. There was no room for error. "Admiral Calder, what's the status of the fleet?" Lawson's voice was steady, betraying none of the unease she felt inside. The situation was worse than even she had anticipated. Calder stepped forward, his usually calm demeanor shattered by the pressure of the moment. The fleet's scattered. We're holding a defensive perimeter around Earth, but it's thin. We've lost too many ships already, and the XLR. He paused, exhaling sharply. They move faster than we can track them. We need new tactics, and we need them now. Lawson nodded, her mind already working, piecing together the puzzle. She turned toward the table where a map of the solar system flickered, pinpointing the locations of the Fowler incursions. Earth was vulnerable, but the colonies, they had been the first targets. Lawson knew she couldn't wait for the fleet to catch up. The time to strike back was now. I need a team, she said, her voice cutting through the air. Not just soldiers. I need the best minds in the galaxy. People who understand what it means to survive under impossible odds. We're going to need them all. One by one, the people around the table exchanged uncertain glances. Lawson had been a legend in the military, but this mission would demand more than just tactical brilliance. It would require raw ingenuity, determination, and the courage to confront an unknown enemy. We've already started. Major Jax Morrell spoke up, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Jax was the key to humanity's technological edge, a former rebel engineer turned military innovator. His quiet confidence was a steadying influence on the room. I've already reached out to some people. We'll need more than just military might. We'll need to outthink the XLR. Lawson's gaze locked onto Jax. Who do you have in mind? I've contacted Dr. Serafina Ulm, Jax said, tapping a button on his wrist pad to bring up a holographic image of a woman with striking silver hair and piercing green eyes. She's one of the best diplomats we have, and she's been operating in Feller space for the past 2 years. If anyone knows how they think, it's her. At the mention of Serafina's name, a murmur rippled through the room. Serafina Ulm had earned a reputation as both a brilliant negotiator and a skilled operative, though her true loyalty had always been questioned by some. Lawson had worked with her briefly during the tense post-war negotiations between human factions, but this was different. They needed her expertise, and Lawson wasn't sure if they could trust her. She's been deep undercover? Lawson asked, her voice skeptical. Jax nodded. She's had no choice. The Fowler are relentless in their intelligence gathering. We've kept her in the shadows to protect her, until now. Lawson hesitated for a moment before speaking. Get her on a secure channel. We'll need everything she knows. We're also contacting Zorn, said Jax, his eyes narrowing. He's someone who can help us understand the Fowler's military tactics better than anyone. He used to serve in their ranks. The room fell silent. Zorn, a former Xalar soldier who had defected after seeing the brutality of his own people. His intelligence would be invaluable, but it came with a risk. There were still those who believed he was a traitor, a spy, but Lawson knew that the stakes had grown too high for hesitation. Get them both, Lawson ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. And anyone else you think can help. We don't have the luxury of time. The XLR won't stop until we're wiped out. As the team scrambled to make the necessary arrangements, Lawson took a moment to collect her thoughts. The next few days would be critical. She'd fought wars before, but nothing like this. The XLR weren't just invaders. They were methodical, relentless, and terrifyingly powerful. In the dim light of the war room, Lawson's gaze hardened. The fate of humanity rested on her shoulders once again, but this time she wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting to ensure that humanity would not just survive, but prevail against a foe that had underestimated the one thing the XLR couldn't understand: the indomitable spirit of humanity. The vastness of space felt suffocating as Captain Eva Lawson stared at the holographic display, her fingers tracing the outlines of the Xalar fleet now closing in on Earth's defense perimeter. The fleet's movements were like clockwork, precise and calculating. With every passing hour, the threat grew more imminent. This was no longer just a defensive mission. It was a war for humanity's future. "We've got a window," Lawson muttered, her voice low but sharp. The mission would take every ounce of cunning and innovation they could muster. The XLR's tactics were known for their overwhelming force and swift precision, two characteristics that had decimated several of Earth's outer colonies. But Lawson believed humanity's greatest strength was its adaptability. They didn't need to beat the XLR head-on, they just had to outsmart them. "Admiral Calder, are we ready to proceed with the strike?" Lawson turned her gaze toward the fleet commander, who had remained stoic throughout the planning. Calder nodded, his expression grim. "We're outnumbered, Captain. But if we can get close enough, we can use the cloaking technology Jax developed to slip past their sensors. A hit-and-run tactic, just like you suggested." Jax, standing near the edge of the room, with arms folded, added, "It's a risk. The cloaking field can only last for a short while before it starts to destabilize. We'll have one shot at this." Lawson turned toward him, locking eyes. "One shot's all we need." With a nod, Jack set to work, coordinating the fleet's movements. Lawson's heart raced as she thought of the lives at stake. They couldn't afford a mistake. She would not allow Earth to fall so easily. The plan was set. The fleet would deploy a small strike team, equipped with the experimental cloaking devices, to launch a surprise attack on the XLR dreadnought Vornak, the flagship of the XLR Armada currently orbiting the outer reaches of Earth's space. The Vornak was the heart of the fleet, and if they could destroy it, they might be able to force the XLR into retreat. It was a gamble, but one worth taking. "Status report," Lawson called out. "Cloak is engaged," Jax replied, tapping a few commands into his wrist pad. "We're going dark, now." The human fleet, invisible to the enemy's sensors, slipped through the vastness of space like a shadow. The tension in the war room was palpable. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. Then, suddenly, the alert lights began flashing. A warning. Something was wrong. "Report," Lawson demanded. "It's a trap," Serafina's voice came through from the communications link. "The XLR knew we were coming. They've set a gravitational minefield around the Vornak." Lawson cursed under her breath. The XLR had anticipated their move. The enemy was always one step ahead. "We've been compromised," Admiral Calder confirmed. "We're in the minefield, Captain. The cloaking tech won't last long, and we're too close to their fleet." The strike team was now boxed in. Lawson's mind raced as she calculated their options. They couldn't withdraw. The XLR would cut them down before they could retreat. They had to strike now. "Deploy EMPs," Lawson ordered without hesitation. "Disrupt their systems. We're going in." In a desperate move, the fleet launched electromagnetic pulses, temporarily disabling the XLR ship's weapons and communication systems. For a fleeting moment, chaos erupted among the enemy ranks. It was all they needed. The human fleet, still cloaked but now visible to the enemy's eyes, darted toward the Vornak with precision. Lawson's ship, the Vigilant, led the charge, dodging XLR fire as the crew worked feverishly to breach the flagship's defenses. In the heart of the battle, Lawson gave the order: "Prepare the ion cannon. Target their command center." The weapon fired. A massive surge of energy shot out, cutting through the XLR's hull like a hot knife through butter. The Vornak shuddered violently, its main command center erupting in a fiery explosion. The human fleet watched in stunned silence as the flagship, once the symbol of XLR power, began to break apart. But victory was bittersweet. The human fleet had sustained significant damage, and the XLR were quick to retaliate, launching counterattacks from their remaining warships. The battle was far from over. "Captain, we've made our mark," Jack said, voice tense. "But we need to pull back. Now." Lawson's eyes scanned the remaining XLR fleet as the Vigilant began to maneuver away. It wasn't a decisive victory, but it was a beginning. A reminder that humanity could still fight back, and that, against all odds, they could win. "Everyone, brace for retreat," Lawson ordered. "This is just the start. We've given Earth a chance. Now we take it." The remnants of that Thaler flagship Vornak floated in space, its shattered hull a testament to the fierce battle that had just unfolded. The human fleet, though battered, had retreated with a rare sense of triumph. For the first time, humanity had successfully struck a blow against the Thaler dominion. But in the silence that followed the battle, Captain Eva Lawson knew the victory was only temporary. It was only a matter of time before the SLR would retaliate, and they would come harder, faster, and with far more force. Back at the command center aboard Earth's primary warship, the Vigilant, Lawson paced the room, lost in thought. The destruction of Vornak was a small victory, but it had come at a great cost. The loss of their flagship meant the Xalar would no longer underestimate humanity's resolve, but they would not simply accept defeat. They would adapt. "Captain, we've got something." Jax Morell's voice broke her reverie. He stood at a nearby console, his fingers flying over the keys as his eyes fixed on the data screen. "I've been going through the wreckage of the Vornak. There's a lot of encrypted information here, but I think I've cracked it." Lawson's gaze hardened. "What did you find?" Jax didn't answer immediately. Instead, he transferred the data to the holographic display at the center of the room. A series of files opened, revealing plans, maps, and documents that painted a dark picture of the Xalar's true intentions. As the information loaded, Lawson's jaw tightened. "They've been watching us for centuries," Jack said quietly, his voice tinged with disbelief. "The Xalar, they didn't just decide to invade Earth. They've been gathering intelligence on humanity for as long as we've been expanding into space." Lawson crossed the room, her attention fixed on the data. The files showed years of covert operations, espionage, sabotage, and psychological warfare aimed at studying humanity's growth, resilience, and adaptability. The XLR had learned more than they should have about humanity's potential, about how humans fought back, how they adapted, and how they refused to stay down after every defeat. What had once seemed like scattered data now formed a coherent pattern. "The XLR know our strength," Lawson murmured, "but it's more than just fear of our military might. They see us as a threat to their existence. We're everything they can't be: adaptable, unpredictable, and, above all, united." Serafina Uln, who had been monitoring the conversation from a secure station, spoke up. "The XLR are a race of conquerors. They've dominated many worlds, but they've never encountered something like humanity before. They study us, trying to understand how we fight, how we endure. And the truth is, they've come to the conclusion that we represent a challenge they can't afford to leave unchecked." Lawson nodded, her eyes scanning the new information with a growing sense of urgency. "It explains their tactics. They didn't just want to conquer us, they wanted to learn from us, to use our strengths against us. That's why their attacks have been so precise, so brutal. They've been testing us, trying to provoke a response." Jax added, "There's more. From what I can gather, the XLR have developed a new weapon, something even worse than their fleet. If they succeed in activating it, it could change the entire balance of power. It's not just a weapon of destruction. It's a weapon that could erase entire species from existence." Lawson's heart skipped a beat. What kind of weapon? Jax hesitated, his fingers moving over the console, trying to decode the remaining fragments. "It's not clear yet, but based on their research, it involves manipulating genetic data on a planetary scale. If they've perfected it, they could wipe out humanity by targeting specific DNA markers. No one would be safe." The room fell silent. The realization hit like a blow. The XLR didn't just want Earth, they wanted to erase humanity itself. "We need to stop them before they activate this weapon," Lawson said, her voice resolute. "Get me everything you can on that technology, Jax. We need to find a way to counter it. Serafina, I want you to start reaching out to the SLR defectors. Anyone who's ever had contact with their high command could have the key to stopping this. We're already on it, Serafina replied. I'll start with Zorn. If anyone knows how to get to the heart of the Xillar war machine, it's him. Lawson turned toward the star map flickering before her, the coordinates of Xillar-controlled systems blinking ominously. Earth was already in the crosshairs. But now, with this new weapon in play, it wasn't just Earth's future at risk. It was the future of humanity itself. There's no time to waste, Lawson said, her voice growing colder with determination. We move forward, no matter the cost. Prepare the fleet. We're going to find this weapon and take it from them, before it takes us. The silence that followed the discovery of the Xillar's genetic weapon was deafening. In the war room aboard the Vigilant, the weight of the threat hung over the gathered team like a cloud. The human fleet had scored a victory, but they had just learned that the Xillar weren't only after domination. They were after extinction. Captain Eva Lawson stood at the center of the room, her eyes fixed on the map of Xillar-controlled space. The coordinates marked a system deep within enemy territory, an isolated moon where the Xillar had begun developing their weapon. To destroy it, they would need to infiltrate the heart of their operations and strike at the very core of their plans. It was a suicide mission, but there was no other choice. The longer they waited, the closer the Xillar came to finishing their weapon. We don't have much time, Lawson said, her voice sharp with urgency. We've identified the location of the Xillar's research facility. If we don't move quickly, they'll activate this weapon, and it will be the end of humanity as we know it. Serafina Ulm, standing near a tactical console, looked up, her sharp green eyes calculating. I've been in Xillar space before, but this is different. The facility is likely heavily guarded, and they'll expect us. We can't go in blind. Lawson nodded. That's why we're bringing in Zorn. He knows their military tactics better than anyone. He'll guide us through their defenses. Zorn, the former Xillar soldier-turned-defector, had become an invaluable ally to humanity. His intimate knowledge of the Xillar war machine was unparalleled, but there was a lingering distrust of him among some of the crew. His history as a soldier in the Xillar ranks made him both a priceless asset and a dangerous wildcard. But Lawson had little time for hesitation. He was their best chance at survival. Zorn will be on board within the hour, Jax Morrell said, his fingers flying over the console as he coordinated with the fleet's engineers. I've also adjusted the cloaking technology to work within Xillar-controlled systems. We'll be able to move undetected for a limited time. That gives us a narrow window, Lawson said, staring intently at the tactical display. We'll hit them fast, strike hard, and get out. We don't have the luxury of a prolonged engagement. The plan was as simple as it was dangerous. They would infiltrate the Xillar research facility, sabotage the weapon, and retreat before the Xillar could react. But even with Zorn's inside knowledge and Jax's technological enhancements, the mission was a long shot. There were too many unknowns, too many risks. We also need to prepare for the worst, Lawson continued. If this doesn't work, if we fail to stop their weapon, Earth will be at their mercy, and we won't get another chance. Major Jax Morrell, ever the optimist, gave a tight nod. If we pull this off, it'll be a blow they won't recover from. But if we don't, well, we'll make sure they know humanity's not an easy target. Serafina's expression hardened. I've seen the Xillar's cruelty firsthand. They won't hesitate. They'll wipe us out without a second thought. A chill ran through the room as the reality of their mission settled in. The stakes were higher than ever before. Earth was on the brink of annihilation, and the only way to stop it was to risk everything in an attack that could either save or doom them all. Lawson turned to her crew, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. We'll rendezvous with the rest of the fleet outside Xillar space. I'll be taking a small team with me to the surface. Zorn, you'll lead the way. Jax, I'll need your techs to monitor the operation. Serafina, you'll provide diplomatic cover if necessary. Zorn, who had been standing quietly in the back of the room, finally spoke. His voice was low, but full of resolve. I know their tactics. I know the weaknesses. But be prepared. The XLR will not take this lightly. We're not just infiltrating a facility. We're stepping into the lion's den. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Lawson met his gaze, her own expression unwavering. We'll make sure the lion never sees us coming, she said, her voice a quiet promise. Let's move out. Humanity's future depends on us. The silence of deep space was shattered by the hum of engines as the Vigilant and its strike team crossed into Solar-controlled territory. The vast expanse of space was now a labyrinth of enemies. Every star, every planet, a potential threat. Their destination was a small, uninhabited moon orbiting a dying star. The XLR had chosen it because of its isolation. It was the perfect place to hide their most dangerous weapon. Captain Eva Lawson stood in the command center, staring at the view of the planet below. Her heart pounded in her chest, the weight of the mission heavy on her shoulders. They were about to infiltrate a heavily fortified research facility and destroy a weapon that could wipe out humanity. Every instinct in her told her this was their last chance. If they failed, Earth would be lost. Zorn, the former Xalar soldier who had once been a part of the Empire's military elite, stood nearby, his gaze fixed on the holographic display. His alien features, sharp, angular, with dark skin that shimmered like polished stone, seemed to reflect the gravity of the mission. He had once been one of them, a loyal servant of the Thalar Dominion. But now, standing with humanity, he was a symbol of their greatest hope. We're entering the moon's orbit, said Jax Morel, his fingers dancing over his console. He had been working feverishly to keep the ship's cloaking systems active, ensuring they wouldn't be detected before they could make their move. The facility's on the far side, hidden beneath the surface. I'm keeping us off their sensors, but it's going to be close. Serafina Aln, the mission's intelligence officer, added, We've got a limited window before the XLR notice our presence. We'll have to get in, plant the charges, and get out before they know we're here. Lawson turned to Zorn, who was staring at the map. You know their security protocols. How do we get past the main entrance? Zorn's eyes flickered briefly, his expression unreadable. The XLR are thorough, but they're predictable. The security is based on timing, regular patrols, and automated drones. If we follow the patrol route exactly, we can bypass most of the defenses, but you'll need to move quickly. Serafina leaned forward, her voice intense. And if we're detected? Zorn's gaze was steady. We'll be dead before we can blink. The tension in the room was palpable. Lawson took a deep breath, steadying herself. The mission was risky, too risky, but there was no turning back now. If they failed, Earth would not survive. Let's move, Lawson said, her voice calm, despite the storm of emotions inside her. Minutes later, they were on the surface of the moon, stepping into the cold, barren landscape. The facility loomed in the distance, a dark structure half buried beneath the moon's surface. The only sound was the faint hiss of their oxygen masks and the crunch of their boots against the fine, powdery dust. Zorn led the way, his every step calculated. The rest of the team followed closely behind, weapons ready, their senses heightened. Every corner could hide an ambush. Every shadow could be an enemy. 5 minutes until the first patrol comes through, Zorn whispered, his voice low, almost lost in the wind. Lawson nodded, keeping her breathing steady. They had no room for error. As they reached the facility's entrance, the massive steel doors loomed before them, reinforced with SLR technology. It would take seconds for the facility's security system to detect them if they didn't get the timing right. Now, Zorn said, activating a hidden panel on the side of the door. His fingers flew over the small keypad, and with a soft hiss, the door slid open just enough to allow them to slip inside. The facility was dark and silent. The air was stale, but there was a coldness that felt unnatural. As they moved deeper into the compound, Lawson could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her. Every second counted. Jack spoke through the comms. "I'm in position. I'll set up the detonators once you've reached the core. Just keep moving." They passed through long, narrow hallways, avoiding the security drones and cellar patrols with barely a breath between them. Zorn's knowledge of the layout proved invaluable, guiding them with precision. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility, the central research chamber. Inside, vast banks of computers hummed, their screens flashing with data. But it wasn't the machinery that drew Lawson's attention. In the center of the room, behind a transparent shield, stood a glowing device. It was the weapon, an orb of pulsing, swirling energy. A weapon that could erase entire species from existence. "Set the charges," Lawson ordered, her voice tight with urgency. Jax's voice came through the comms once more. "Charges are in place. You've got 10 minutes before they detect us." The clock was ticking. Lawson stood before the weapon, her heart hammering. One wrong move, and humanity would be doomed. But as she reached for the detonator, a voice broke through the silence. "You really think you can stop it?" Lawson turned, her hand frozen midair. Standing in the doorway was a figure, cloaked in shadows, an alien face, familiar yet terrifying. It was Exalar Commander. The air inside the facility seemed to grow thicker, heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Captain Eva Lawson's fingers tightened around the detonator, but she didn't move. The voice that had spoken was like a cold whisper through the dark, a voice she recognized. The Exalar Commander, his tall, imposing frame, silhouetted by the faint glow of the facility's lighting, stepped forward. His skin shimmered in the dim light, dark and polished like obsidian. His eyes, glowing with a faint yellow hue, locked onto Lawson's with unnerving intensity. "You really think you can stop us?" the commander repeated, his voice low and mocking. "The weapon you've come to destroy is beyond your comprehension. You've seen nothing yet." Lawson's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. They had no time for games. The charges were set, but every second spent in this face-off with the Exalar Commander brought them closer to detection and disaster. "Step aside," Lawson said, her voice steady. "We're here to finish what we started." Zorn, who had remained eerily silent up until this point, took a small step forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the commander. "Corzan," he said softly, the recognition in his voice unmistakable. "I should have known it was you." The commander, Corzan, stared at Zorn, his expression flickering between annoyance and amusement. "Zorn, the traitor, it's been a long time. I see you still cling to your delusions of rebellion. How quaint." Lawson's hand hovered over the detonator. She couldn't allow this to devolve into a confrontation. The stakes were too high. "We don't have time for your games, Corzan. We're here to destroy your weapon, and we will." Corzan's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You misunderstand, human. It's already too late. The weapon is active. You cannot destroy what you do not understand. And even if you do, your efforts are meaningless." "What do you mean?" Lawson demanded, her heart sinking with the realization that they might be too late. Corzan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The genetic weapon you came to destroy is not just a tool of mass extermination. It's an evolutionary catalyst. The Exalar have perfected it. Our species will ascend beyond the limitations of biology. When we activate it, we will be beyond the need for your pathetic human resistance. Your kind will be eradicated, not out of hatred, but out of necessity. We cannot allow you to survive." Zorn's eyes widened with understanding, his jaw tightening in fury. "You don't know what you're talking about, Corzan. The Exalar aren't evolving. They're de-evolving, giving in to their own desperation. This weapon, it's not a step forward, it's a path to destruction." Corzan laughed, the sound harsh and cold. You speak of hope like a child's dream. The Exceller Empire will not bend to weakness. We will reshape the galaxy. We will be the masters of this universe. Lawson couldn't afford to listen to his delusions any longer. Her hand dropped to the detonator, her finger closing over the trigger. But before she could act, the facility's alarms blared to life, flashing red in warning. Breach detected. Security lockdown initiated. The walls trembled, and a series of steel shutters slammed down, sealing the room off from the rest of the facility. Lawson's stomach dropped as she realized what was happening. They were no longer alone. More Exceller soldiers were coming. "Get to the charges now," Lawson shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Zorn spun on his heel, charging for the central chamber where the genetic weapon was housed. Lawson followed, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea how much time they had left before the XLR initiated the countdown for the weapon, but she couldn't let Corzan's twisted vision come to fruition. Behind them, Corzan laughed again, this time with darker malice. "You may kill me, human, but you'll never stop the evolution of my people. The Exceller will rise." Lawson didn't look back. She focused entirely on the task at hand, stopping the weapon before it could unleash devastation. The team was already making their way to the core, placing the last of the explosives as the countdown began ticking down. 10 minutes. It wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. The countdown echoed through Lawson's mind as she and the team sprinted toward the core chamber, the flashing red lights of the facility blinding in their intensity. They had minutes, maybe less, before the Exceller's genetic weapon would be triggered. Every step felt like an eternity. The sound of their boots pounding against the steel floors was drowned out by the blaring alarms, warning them of the growing threat they could no longer outrun. Zorn was at the front, his long strides carrying him ahead of the group. Despite his alien origins and his history as a Exceller soldier, he moved with the precision of a warrior who had seen more than his share of battles. The door to the central chamber loomed ahead, a massive reinforced gate that required an access code to unlock. As Zorn reached the door, his hands moved quickly, his fingers manipulating the keypad with fluid ease. A low hum filled the air as the door's lock disengaged, and it slowly began to open. Behind them, the sound of Exceller soldiers closing in grew louder. Time was running out. "Move, move," Lawson shouted as the door slid open, revealing the weapon, a glowing sphere suspended in a transparent containment unit. It pulsed with energy, radiating a strange, unsettling light. She could feel the power of it, the sheer destructive force that lay within. If they didn't destroy it now, humanity would be lost. Jax Morell, the ship's tech specialist, moved quickly to set the final charge. He was calm, despite the mounting pressure. "I've set the charges on the containment unit. Once we hit the switch, the whole room will be incinerated. That should be enough to destroy the weapon." "Good. Let's get out of here," Lawson said, her voice tight. But before they could make their way to the exit, a voice cut through the tension. "Leaving so soon, Captain?" Corzan. He stood in the doorway, flanked by a dozen Exceller soldiers. His eyes burned with a cruel, triumphant light. "I won't let you destroy the future of my people. You may have gotten this far, but you'll never leave this facility alive." Lawson's heart skipped a beat. They had no way out. The Exceller commander was blocking the only exit, and the countdown was ticking faster than they could react. "You'll have to kill us first, Corzan," Lawson said, her voice cold with determination. She drew her sidearm, the metallic clink of the weapon loud in the tense silence. Corzan stepped forward, his glowing eyes narrowed. "I thought you might say that." He raised his hand, and the Exceller soldiers aimed their weapons at the team, their energy rifles humming with lethal power. "But there's one thing you don't understand, Captain. The weapon isn't just a tool, it's a gift. It will grant us the power to reshape the galaxy. You can't stop what has already begun." "Then we'll die trying," Zorn muttered, his hand tightening around the pulse rifle at his side. Without warning, the room erupted in chaos. The Exceller soldiers fired first, their shots sizzling through the air. Lawson dove behind a column, narrowly avoiding the blast. Zorn returned fire with precision, his shots taking out one of the soldiers before he was forced to retreat into cover. The detonator. Lawson's eyes darted to where Jax had placed the explosive device, now ticking dangerously close to zero. "Jax," she shouted, "activate the charges now." But just as Jax reached for the detonator, Corzin moved with lightning speed, slamming his fist into Jax's chest. The young technician was sent flying, his body crashing into a wall with a sickening thud. He groaned, struggling to get up. "Jax," Lawson cried. The countdown reached 5 seconds. She knew they had no more time. Without hesitation, Lawson sprang into action, leaping over her cover and charging toward Corzin. With a battle cry, she tackled the sailor commander, her fists flying. The impact sent him stumbling, but Corzin quickly regained his footing. He shoved Lawson off, sending her sprawling across the floor. Behind her, she heard Zorn's voice, cold and commanding. "Now, Jax." With a final, desperate push, Jax slammed his hand onto the detonator. The explosion was deafening. A brilliant wave of energy blasted through the chamber, a surge of white-hot light that incinerated everything in its path. The weapon, the Exceller soldiers, and the entire research facility were consumed in the shockwave. The force of the blast threw Lawson to the ground, and for a moment, everything went black. When she opened her eyes, the dust had settled. The room was a wreck, the walls scorched, and the faint smell of burnt metal filled the air. But the weapon was gone. Zorn limped over to her, his face grim but alive. He helped her to her feet, his eyes scanning the wreckage. "Is it over?" Lawson asked, her voice hoarse. Zorn nodded. "For now. The weapon is destroyed, but the war is far from over." The rest of the team regrouped, their faces streaked with sweat and soot, but there was a flicker of relief in their eyes. They had done it. They had stopped the Exceller's weapon. But Lawson knew that this was only a temporary victory. The war was far from finished, and the Exceller would come again. Humanity had made its stand, and for the first time, it had won. This final part of the Shield of Humanity, Earth's Defenders Unite, concludes the intense mission to destroy the Exceller's weapon, culminating in a final confrontation with Corzin. The team's sacrifice ensures victory, but the future remains uncertain. The story ends on a note of triumph, yet with an understanding that humanity's fight is far from over. Let me know if you'd like any further edits or additions.